Good afternoon, GQ Radio listeners. Welcome to Go With Grace. My name is Joe, and I'm your host today. So let's get going and get growing on our journey today to be the best badass version of ourselves. In the background, I'm playing some music that very familiar to all you U.S. Marines out there, so I'm playing that in honor of you. Hoorah! As we get ready to celebrate the Marine Corps birthday this Sunday. Today also marks 56 days until 2020 and a whole new decade. So what are you doing today to make the next decade of your life the very best badass rockin' decade? Much of our show today will be content regarding this weekend coming up with the U.S. Marine Corps birthday on Sunday, St. Martin's Day, and the coming Veterans Day holiday on Monday. As a fellow service member and having several friends who are Marines, I want to make sure everyone understands something very important. There's no such thing as a former Marine or ex-Marine. Those derogatory terms are only used for those dishonorably discharged. So I ask you this Sunday to find a Marine and thank them. Shake their hand, buy them a drink, pay for their meal, or just a good slap on the back. If you want to add some humor, have a box of crayons handy. After you thank them for their service, hand them the crayons and tell them, I got you some snacks. And as you probably already know, the red ones taste the best. Seriously, though, on Sunday, November 10th, the Marine Corps will be 244 years old. So, hoorah to all you Marines out there. And the proper way to refer to a Marine is once a Marine, always a Marine. The origin of this statement is credited to a gung-ho Marine Master Sergeant, Paul Woischner, who, of course, during a barroom fight, got into an argument, and he shouted, once a Marine, always a Marine. Hoorah! So that goes out to you Marines out there. Stay classy, you guys. The first segment of our show, we will be talking about the law of the mirror. And the law of the mirror simply says you must see value in yourself to add value to yourself. The second segment we'll be talking about is our Today in History and our Medal of Honor Minute. Today, in honor of the U.S. Marine Corps birthday, we'll be hearing about a Navy lieutenant and chaplain who was in support of the Marines during the Vietnam War. Chaplain Vincent Capodanno was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions in the Vietnam War. The second half of the show today, we'll be interviewing a good friend of mine and fellow Army Reserve chaplain, Chaplain Daniel Haas. We met several years ago when he was a parish pastor and came to visit one of the patients at the hospital I was working as the chaplain. He's going to tell us about St. Martin's Day and how it connects to Veterans Day on November 11th on Monday, and he'll be talking about his work as a hospital chaplain. So now let's take a quick break for some jokes and quotes. Henry Ford once said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And then a quote from Les Brown, I really like this when he says, too many of us are not living our dreams because we are living our fears. And you know, I wasn't always a chaplain. In my younger years, I was a hothead, an angry person, and sometimes that caused me to get into a couple of fights. Sometimes I won and sometimes I lost. But this one time I got into a fight with this really big dude, and he told me, I'm going to mop the floor with your head. So I just responded to him coolly and tried to de-escalate the situation and told him, you're going to regret that if you do. So he said, oh yeah, what's that mean? What are you going to do about it? So I laughed and told him, you're going to have a hard time getting into the corners. All right. So the next joke is, I want to ask you, what's the difference between a hippo and a Zippo? Anybody know that one? A hippo is really heavy and a Zippo is a little lighter. A little lighter. All right, so let's take a quick break and listen to some more Marine Corps music, and I'll get right back to you. All right, guys and gals, coming right back to you. I'm going to let that play in the background for all you Marines out there. Today we're talking about the law of the mirror. The law of the mirror simply says you must see value in yourself to add value to yourself. You will not give yourself time to grow if you think you're not worthy of it. If my self-image is viewed as a level 3, I will never be able to rise above that level. So your lid, or your self-esteem lid, your self-image lid, will keep you from rising above. It will keep you from rising to the level of your full potential, from the best that God intends for you. You will never outperform your self-image. If you lack basic self-trust, self-respect, and self-confidence, your self-esteem deficiency will limit you, no matter what other assets you may possess. Why do people fail to grow and reach their potential? Low self-esteem. Many people don't believe in themselves. They don't see the possibilities that God has put in them. The law of the mirror, how we see ourselves, it's huge. If you really want to add value to yourself, number one, you must guard against self-talk, particularly negative self-talk. Every one of us talks to ourselves. Do you talk to yourself out loud? I do. Sometimes that's the only way to have an intelligent conversation, right? Do you know the most important person you listen to all day? It's you. The damage done by others is nothing compared to the damage we do to ourselves. We often depreciate ourselves, don't we? The problem isn't even that we talk to ourselves. The problem is that we actually listen. The writer of Proverbs had it so right. Words have the power of life and death. They sure do. In the book, The Answer, it talks about the negative messages children receive growing up. By the time you're 17 years old, it said you've heard "no, you can't" an average of 150,000 times, while you've heard "yes, you can" maybe 5,000. That makes for a powerful message of "I can't." So we all need to get in the habit of telling ourselves, yes, we can. Write it on the mirror of your bathroom, post it everywhere, in your car, in your wallet, everywhere you can. Your self-talk is huge. Number two, if you really want to add value to yourself, you have to add value to others. When anyone is feeling bad about themselves, feeling bad about who they are, or feeling down, I tell them to lose themselves by giving yourself to someone else. Go out and add value to someone else. Do a good deed. There's something powerful about helping others, because it's hard to feel bad about yourself when you're doing something for someone else. Number three, do the right thing even when it's the hard thing. Because as I've said before, right actions equal right emotions. Always has, always will. That's a fact. And number four, every day get a win. I want to pause just to let that sink in and repeat that for you guys. It's very important that every day we get a win. Every day you want to look at your schedule and ask yourself, what am I going to do today that is going to give me a win under my belt? What am I going to do today that will make me feel good about what I've done? That will make me feel good about getting out of the bed and facing this day? Ask yourself, where is my win going to be today? Notice I didn't say if you will get a win. No, what I'm saying here is, where will your win come from today? That difference may seem subtle, but it's huge. Your mindset is vitally important. Why? Because a lot of little wins really build self-confidence and add up over time. A man went to a fortune teller to hear what she had to say about his future. She looked into a crystal ball and said, "You will be poor and unhappy until you're 45 years old." And then the man asked hopefully, then what will happen after that? She said, "Then you'll get used to it." I'm sorry to say, that's the way most of us live our lives, according to what others believe about ourselves. So don't be concerned about what others think about you. If you put a small value on yourself, guess what? And rest assured, the world will not raise the price. The law of the mirror. It's a terrific law. Basically, the thesis of the law is this: if you don't believe in yourself, you won't bet on yourself. When you go up to the window of life to place a bet down on you, what do you lay down? How willing are you to bet on yourself? And listen to me, no one is going to place a bet down on you if you're not willing to bet on yourself first. Can I tell you something? If you feel that you are worth it, you will invest the time and the effort that it takes to grow, no matter what that is. But if you think you're not worth it, you won't invest the time, the money, and the effort that's required. And number 5, move beyond our limiting beliefs. We've all got a lot of BS in our lives we're dealing with, don't we? I know I sure do. It's all around us. The BS is everywhere. Well, guess what? The real BS that needs your attention is your own BS. And I need to deal with my own BS as well as you. What I'm talking about is our belief systems. We've got to move beyond our limiting beliefs systems. Another way I like to stay reminded of this powerful principle, especially since I'm pretty regularly struggling with maintaining my sexy physique. I'm being funny, but I'm also being truthful here. I do struggle with my weight because at times I don't see the value in myself and the importance of how the little daily wins and losses add up over time. So I want to drive that principle home to you today. I often fool myself that I can cheat the system and cheat my body and eat the things and do the things that won't help me maintain healthy LBs. You know, pounds on the weight scale. I rarely say I hate things, but there's 2 things I hate, and that's scales and weight scales and cats. I hate weight scales because it always tells me the truth that I don't want to hear. It usually says something like, ouch, or hey, fat ass, one person at a time. Seriously, though, you and I, we've got to lose those LBs, the limiting belief systems that hold us back from realizing our full potential and keep us from achieving little daily wins. I mentioned Author Jack Canfield before, talking about his turnaround statements. I encourage you to go back to episode 1 toward the end where I talk about that in more detail. But Jack Canfield offers us a solution to our self-limiting thinking. In his book, The Success Principles, he recommends the following 4 steps to transforming limiting beliefs into empowering beliefs. First thing is to identify a limiting belief that you want to change. Second, determine how the belief limits you. Third, decide how you want to be, act, or feel. And lastly, create a turnaround statement that affirms or gives you the permission to be, act, and feel the way you want, your new way of thinking. So create or find your turnaround statement and plaster it everywhere until it penetrates your thinking. Remember, in the end, it isn't what you are that holds you back. It's what you think you're not. And lastly, practice the one-word strategy. In Kevin Hall's book, Aspire, he says, when seeking to encourage someone who aspires to stretch themselves, to grow, and to go to a higher place, he has that person select one word that best describes him or her. Something else he says that's so very powerful is that what an individual focuses on expands. I ask you, if you could pick just one word that best describes yourself, what would that be? I did this strategy, this exercise a couple of months back, and what I did was took a different spin on it, but I looked back at my past evaluations in the military, but you could apply this to your civilian job or your quarterly reviews or whatever else it is, or what people say about you on your Facebook or social media. Look back at it and kind of get a consensus of what people say or what you think. Well, I did that with my evaluations. I came up with a couple of words that were kind of humbling, but they were superb, excels, cares, caring, and care. So from that, I basically got my one-word strategy as care. And the way I helped myself remember it is that I jumbled up the letters and added a G to the front. And what does that make? It's pretty cool. It comes up with the word grace. Yeah, I know it's kind of hokey, but hey, it helps me remember to care for others when it's so easy to be selfish. So that wraps up our discussion today on the law of the mirror. So I encourage you this week to spend some time to journal and write down on a piece of paper your one-word strategy, and to come up with a turnaround statement that you can use to get over your LBs and to change your thinking to empowered thinking. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, GQ Radio audience, listeners, coming back to you now with our Medal of Honor Minute today. Chaplains don't usually come to mind when the words combat soldier are mentioned. Yet 16 American chaplains lost their lives in the line of duty during the Vietnam War alone. 2 of them, both Catholic priests, Navy Lieutenant Vincent Robert Capodanno and Army Major Charles Joseph Waters, who we'll hear about next week, were posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for their heroism and valor on the battlefield. Father Capodanno, a man many Marines called a saint, is now in fact a candidate for canonization. Capodanno was known to his troops as the Grunt Padre. Marine veteran Ray Harton remembers meeting him in a base mess tent. He was just like one of the Marines. His voice was what set him off from the rest. Soft-spoken yet gruff enough to get your attention. He prayed with us and let us know he was there. Retired Marine Colonel Gerald H. Turley described Capodanno as a humble person, obviously at peace with himself in a place where the war was going on. Vincent Capodanno was born in Staten Island, New York on February 13th, 1929. In December 1965, he was commissioned as a lieutenant in the Navy Chaplain Corps and was assigned to the 1st Marine Division in Vietnam. In April of 1966, he immediately fell in love with his Marines. I can identify with that, fall in love with my soldiers. On September 4th, 1967, during Operation Swift in the Khe Sanh Valley, Chaplain Capodanno accompanied the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, when Mike and Kilo companies were sent to support 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, which was heavily engaged with some 2,500 enemy troops near the village of Dong Son. When Chaplain Capodanno learned that Mike Company's 2nd Platoon was in danger of being overrun, he left the relative safety of the company command post and raced to the beleaguered Marines. The chaplain immediately began attending to the dead and dying, administering last rites. Harton felt someone touch him. Father Capodanno spoke to him in a soft voice, "Stay calm, Marine. Someone will be here to help. God is with us all this day." As Father Capodanno moved among the Marines, he was wounded in the face. The company commander requested tear gas on the enemy positions from the supporting mortars, and Capodanno gave his own gas mask to a Marine who had lost his. "You need it more than I," the chaplain said, as he continued to offer what comfort he could, bareheaded and with blood streaming down his face and neck. The following is a citation for his Medal of Honor. "The President of the United States of America, in the name of Congress, takes pride in presenting the Medal of Honor posthumously to Lieutenant Vincent Robert Capodanno, United States Naval Reserve, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life and above and beyond the call of duty as chaplain of the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, 3rd Marine Division Reinforced Fleet Marine Forces, in connection with operations against enemy forces in Quang Tri Province, Republic of Vietnam, on 4 September 1967. In response to reports that the 2nd Platoon of Mike Company was in danger of being overrun by a massed enemy assaulting force, Lieutenant Capodanno left the relative safety of the company command post and ran through an open area raked with fire directly to the beleaguered platoon. Disregarding the intense enemy small arms, automatic rifle fire, and mortar fire, he moved about the battlefield, administering last rites to the dying and giving medical aid to the wounded. When an exploding mortar round inflicted painful multiple wounds to his arms and legs and severed a portion of his right hand, he steadfastly continued to move about the battlefield as he provided encouragement by voice and example to the valiant Marines. Upon encountering a wounded corpsman in the direct line of fire of an enemy machine gunner positioned approximately 15 yards away, Lieutenant Capodanno rushed in a daring attempt to aid and assist the mortally wounded corpsman. At that instant, only inches from his goal, he was struck down by a burst of machine gun fire. By his heroic conduct on the battlefield and his inspiring example, Lieutenant Capodanno upheld the finest traditions of the U.S. Naval Service. He gallantly gave his life in the cause of freedom. On the day following his death, a letter from Father Capodanno was delivered to the regimental commander of the 5th Marines. He said, he wrote, I am due to go home in late November or early December. I humbly request that I stay over Christmas and New Year's with my men. I am willing to relinquish my 30 days leave. If you'd like to read more about Chaplain Capodanno, check out The Grunt Padre, which is written by Chaplain Daniel Mode, M-O-D-E. It's available on Kindle and in paperback. That's the story of a fellow chaplain who loved every Marine he ever came in contact with. I can say the same for myself. All right, so my guest is here, so I want to take a quick break and bring him in, and we'll get started on our second half of GQ Radio show today, Go With Grace. We'll be right back, guys. Welcome back, GQ Radio audience listeners. My guest today is Chaplain Daniel Haas.
Hi there,
buddy.
Hey, very good. Thanks.
How are you
for
doing
having me.
today?
Very good.
All right. So just to get right into the questions, because I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about all that we discussed last week when we went to lunch. So I know you grew up in Germany, and you told me about St. Martin's Day tradition. Tell us, what's that all about?
Well, in Germany, it's a big deal. Every town has parades on St. Martin's Day where all the elementary schools get together and follow a guy on his horse with his red cape and his sword, and it all ends up in a bonfire. It's basically bringing light into the darkness. So St. Martin is a soldier in the Roman army, centurion type. So in the first part of the first millennium, he rode into the city of Armagnac in what is now France, and there was a beggar by the side of the road who was freezing to death in a cold winter's night. So St. Martin took off his military cloak, drew his sword, cut it in half, shared it with the man, and rode on. So it's about sharing. It's about being there for one another in a cold winter's night.
Very good. Thank you for that, Daniel. And how does that connect us to Veterans Day on Monday?
Well, it just so happens that Veterans Day is on November 11th, and most of my people that I talk to know that that is the day that World War I ended. So the armistice that ended the fighting of World War I was on November 11th. Now, most people do not remember why they signed that treaty then, and that is because it is St. Martin's Day. So the patron saint of soldiers is St. Martin, and the best way to honor and protect soldiers is to end fighting.
That's right. Okay, and you immigrated to the United States in 2008. Not shortly thereafter is when you and I met. Is there a St. Martin's Day tradition here in the United States and in Texas?
I see it somewhat coming from the Mexican culture, but wherever I show up, German communities gather. So there's German language schools all over Houston, for example, and we actually have a parade at church. So yes, we do that. We have a horse and St. Martin and the bonfire, and we do those things that we know from our elementary school days back in the old country. We do that here too, like immigrant communities do.
Okay, thank you. And so what's going on at St. Peter's United this Saturday on November 9th?
Well, it's just that. So at 6 p.m., we're all going to gather, and the beautiful thing about St. Martin's Day is the paper lanterns that kids make. So they take a lot of pride into having those little glow sticks with the lanterns on it. And usually after the parade, you go trick-or-treating. But we did that on Halloween already. Here we Americanized that thing, so we can't do that. But we follow the horse around the neighborhood, and it's actually going to be on Long Point Road in the Spring Branch neighborhood. So for Germans, the focal point is IKEA. That's that part of town.
Okay.
Where we all flock to.
Okay. All right. So our next segue into a little bit more about yourself and what you do now as a career. So you work as a hospital chaplain now. Tell us a little bit about what that's like.
Well, I moved to the hospice chaplaincy now, and that is bringing comfort to people. So it's a hard decision for a family to say, we're not going to go for a cure anymore. It's kind of relenting, fighting that disease, whatever it may be. A lot of times it's cancer or Alzheimer's. So those terminal diseases. And when a family makes that decision, they enter what we call comfort care. So instead of wanting to cure the disease. We're there to keep people comfortable in their body, minds, and souls. So as a chaplain, I come in and see how they're doing with their spiritual wellness, what they need, if they're well connected to their community of faith, their family relationships. And you got a whole team working for you. So your nurse, your aide, a social worker, a bereavement coordinator, we're all there for the family and the patient to make it through this time.
That's key. That's very important for people to know as a chaplain in the hospital. We do go visit patients and pray with them and provide spiritual support, but we also are an important part of the interdisciplinary team especially when it comes time to make that transition from curing the patient to caring for them, especially when end of life becomes an issue. So thank you for what you do as a hospital chaplain. I also know that Compassus is part of the We Honor Vets program. Tell us a little bit about that. What's that about?
Well, around Veterans Day, we talk about veterans a lot. That's why I'm here today. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
But as I said, St. Martin's Day is Veterans Day, so this is the time to talk about veteran care. And the Department of Veteran Affairs offers a hospice benefit, and they don't provide the service. 95% of veterans in hospice care receive that care not from the VA directly, but community hospice organizations like Compassus that I work for. So we go out and provide end-of-life care where people live, be it in retirement homes or in their homes with their families. And we train our people in veteran care according to standards that were developed between the Department of Veteran Affairs and the National Hospice and Palliative Care Association. So it's professional standards, it's training for our folks, and a special focus on our veteran patients and their families.
Okay. And how can my listeners get involved with what's going on?
One of the key events that we do is pinnings and award ceremonies. So every veteran that comes on service with Hospice Compassus gets a pin and a certificate honoring them for their service. These days, a lot of Vietnam folks come on service, and they never received a proper welcome home.
That's right.
And mostly all we need to do is welcome home, brings them to tears and their families as well. So on Veterans Day, we'll be presenting all those certificates and pins in a lot of retirement homes around long-term care facilities all over Greater Houston. I think I have 4 or 5 events that day. And that's where we need volunteers. The We Honor Veterans program only works when volunteers do those presentations. So please, 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 all you veterans out there, we need your support. Join us in helping our veterans by giving them the dignity that they need and deserve. Get involved in the We Honor Veterans program with a hospice company of your choice. Obviously, Compassus would be a good address for you, compassus.com, and come work with us to honor our veterans.
Thank you, Daniel. That's a great, there you go. We talked about earlier in our earlier segment about adding value to others when you're not feeling so hot. So I encourage you guys, there's right there a great resource to get involved with. So reach out to Daniel and Compassus this week and get plugged in and help out, especially those Vietnam era veterans, that help them know you appreciate them and thank them for their service. Well, another thing we didn't discuss about, but it's particularly interesting. Tell us how you came to become an Army chaplain and what led you to want to serve in the United States Army as a chaplain and what that process was like.
Yeah. Ever since I've came to the U.S. like 11 years ago, every church I've ever served, I found that every family in the congregation had one military connection or another. My family had no such background whatsoever. But I wanted to walk in their boots. I wanted to see what that's like to get that experience. So I joined the Army Reserves and have enjoyed it ever since. Also, I watched Rambo growing up.
Okay, so we can thank Rambo for you being an Army chaplain in the Reserves.
That's right. I haven't seen the new movie yet, but I sure will.
I have seen it. It's pretty good. Of all the Rambo movies, it's pretty good. It's like short version of the Rambo just won't die. All right. Well, anything else you want to share with the listening audience today, Daniel?
Keep listening to Joe. He's got good stuff for you.
Thank you.
Your John Maxwell coach will keep you finding good in yourself, improve yourself, and have a good day.
That's right. All right. Thank you guys for listening. We'll take a quick break, and I'll get back to some other great content. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Go With Grace. The rest of our segment we're going to talk about today in history. The first CNI dog in the U.S. happened in November 5th, 1927. An article appears in the Saturday Evening Post by Dorothy Eustace describing how Swiss shepherds were training dogs to lead the blind. This led American Morris Frank to visit Eustace, where he received his own seeing eye dog named Buddy. With Eustace's financial backing, Morris returned to the U.S. with Buddy and co-founded the Seeing Eye to train guide dogs. And I thought of that because it's important and relevant to our history today and what's going on in current events with the hero dog Conan. It's a barking shame, in fact, because the hero dog, who also is a Belgian Malinois, who chased down Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi last week, was wounded after the ISIS boss blew himself up with a suicide vest. But the sad part is he will not receive a Purple Heart. But the good news is he will get to meet the President of the United States sometime this week. So while Conan received high praise, he will not be receiving the Purple Heart, unfortunately. Military working dogs are not eligible for the Purple Heart, even though most of those who serve with canines really believe they should, and as well as I do. Multiple human Purple Heart recipients and combat vets who'd worked closely with canines say courageous canines like Conan were the reason many of them are still alive today. Conan is a Belgian Malinois, a breed prized by the United States military for its smarts and aggression on command. Malinois are similar to German Shepherds, another preferred breed of the U.S. military, but are smaller and have shorter hair and much stronger. Malinois were also used in the raid that resulted in the death of Osama bin Laden, former leader of Al-Qaeda, in 2012. And let me tell you, what I said about Malinois is an understatement. I'm looking up a picture of my dog, Flip, who is half Malinois and half Shepherd. So this is just half the ability of a Malinois, and he is an amazing dog. So this is a picture I'm going to show you. A few years back during Christmas, we were goofing off, and I've taught him my training myself, so he hasn't had a professional trainer train him, but he's so smart that I was able to teach him some pretty amazing tricks. And he does this trick called Leave It, where he puts a treat on his nose, and I say, leave it, I walk around the room, sit down, keep saying leave it, and he sits literally like a Sphinx statue and won't move. So he has that trick down for a long time, and during Christmas we were goofing off, so I figured, hey, how about if I balance a spoon on his nose? And I did that, and that worked great. And then I said, hey, well, how about a yardstick? And then a styrofoam cup. So he did it because he won't move. It's like just sitting on top of a tabletop because he literally won't move. So here's a picture of the event when I had balanced a spoon, a yardstick, and a cup on his nose. So I hope you guys can see that. If you can, I'll share it when I get a chance to reply to your comments on Facebook or on my page. But everyone's always amazed to see that. Again, his name is Flip, and he's pretty amazing. He's 9 years old this year, and actually he was part of my unit ministry team when I was at Fort Knox. My commander gave me the approval to bring him with me, so he went on road marches with the basic training troops, and I have all kind of funny stories I'll end up telling you later, but he is incredibly strong and incredibly smart. Most of the tricks I've taught it to him in a matter of hours, and definitely not more than a day. Usually, it's just incredibly smart, and however smart a German Shepherd is, the Malinois are exponentially smarter. So, and very strong. My son comes over, who's bigger and taller than I am, and he picks Flip up with his bone in his mouth and swings him around. The only person that can get anything out of his mouth is me. So, I don't care who you are, how strong you are, unless you trick him with another toy, he will not let go of that treat. He's got a death grip on it, literally. Okay, and last week I made a prediction that the Astros win the World Series. Well, hey, nobody's perfect. I missed that one. But I thought it was pretty funny last night, just days after Halloween. What happens? Last night on Monday Night Football, a black cat that I nicknamed the Football Feline helped the Cowboys to come back from a deficit and beat the New York Giants last night. So earlier again today, I told you that I hate cats. Well, maybe I'll refine that too. I don't like cats as much. Well, at least I definitely like that cat because it helped my boys bring home a victory. And then today in 1959, Bryan Adams, the Canadian singer, was born in Kingston, Ontario. So one of his favorite songs, most people consider him a one-hit wonder, but that's not really accurate. But I like his song Summer of 69, especially because that's the year of my birth. So we'll play his song later if we have a chance. Don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds you plant. Robert Louis Stevenson said that. I really think that is great because we're only responsible for planting seeds and not the harvest, because God calls us to be seed planters, and He waters and goes behind us, and other people go behind and water the seeds that we plant. So again, this all just goes back to what I said earlier. When you're having a bad day or not feeling good about your life, find someone else that you can encourage or do something for, and take your focus off yourself. It's so easy nowadays to become selfish and self-centered and negative, but when we put some effort to it, we can do some good for other people. And so I encourage you to do that this week. And here's a couple other corny dad jokes I want to share with you. What kind of shoes does an artist wear? Skechers. Did you hear about the nun who quit? She kicked her habit. Okay. And what's the difference? This is one of my favorites too. What's the difference between a poorly dressed man on a tricycle and a well-dressed man on a bicycle? A tire. Get it? A tire and what you wear. All right. Well, let's take a quick break and listen to that Bryan Adams song, and we'll come back for GQ Radio audience listeners. Back for a final wrap-up. I want to thank you guys for listening and tuning in today. I hope that you were blessed by today's broadcast and by our guest, Daniel, today. Hope that you'll have a wonderful week. Hope you get out this weekend sometime on Monday and celebrate Veterans Day by thanking someone you know that served our great country. Be sure to turn in next week when we continue our discussion about personal growth. Next week we'll be talking about the law of reflection. The law of reflection tells us that learning to pause allows growth to catch up with us. So I look forward to seeing you guys next week. God bless you guys, and thanks for listening. Peace out.